On this lesson, we're going to look at what we call scatter plots. Can I graph and determine the correlation of the scatter plot? So we're just going to look at an example, okay? And then we can talk about why it's called a scatter plot, determine the correlation, and draw a trend line. Here's our information. Okay, that's an ALT. That stands for altitude. That's going to be, that's going to be your X. Then the temperature, that's going to be our Y value. So I already have the Y value listed on my graph. I have my graph set up here. Okay, I'm going to label it over here as temp. And then we have the altitude at the bottom that we need to label. Altitude is like how high you are up above ground level, sea level. So the mountains, there's usually a high altitude if you go high up in the mountains. I have my hash marks here, but if we look at our data, we know that 0, 0 would be right at where the X and Y cross, X and Y axis meet. So I'm going to go by 500s. So we got 500, and then 1,000, and I'm going to kind of go every other. Then we have 1,500, and then we have 2,000, and then we have 2,500, 3,000, 3,500, and then 4,000. So now we're going to plot these. We're going to have to estimate. I know there's decimals here. Okay, we're going to go 0 and up to 59, which is going to be really close to that 60 mark. We're just going to put a dot. We're going to go over 500 and up to 59.2, so it's going to be about the same height, not much difference. We're going to go over 1,000 and up to 61, so we're going to be a little bit above that line. That was probably a little too high. Again, we're just kind of estimating where it goes. 1,500, we're going to be at 55. 2,000, we're going to be at 41.6. 2,500, we're at 29, so close to 30. Should probably redo that one too. 3,000, we're at 29.9, so about the same. And 3,500, we're only at 18.1 for temperature-wise. So these dots, and I'll try to make them a little bigger for you. They represent the information in that table. Okay? They represent the information in the table. So the first thing we have to be able to do is graph it. Why is it called scattered? They're all over the place, right? They're kind of just all over the place. This is real data, though. Sometimes our data doesn't give us a straight line. Doesn't have a constant rate of change. Okay? So we're going to describe what's happening with this data. And there's 3 different ways we can describe it. Let's go to the next slide so we can look at it. And tell me, what do you think is happening with these dots? Do you think it is a positive correlation going up, like a positive slope? Or do you think this is a negative correlation going down, or no correlation all over the place? I agree. It is a negative correlation. They're going down as we look at this from left to right. Okay? So we have to be able to graph it. We have to be able to identify, do you think it's going up, going down, or all over the place? And last but not least, we have to be able to draw a trend line. So let's go back to that second slide and talk graph. If we look here, okay, this would not be a good trend line. It's not even between the points. Okay? So our trend line is going to be somewhere in this category, where it is between the points. This trend line's not even touching any of the points. That's okay. It's really close to one of them, or a couple of them. You want your trend line to be a straight line as close to all the points as possible. And the last thing we're going to talk about is identifying that correlation. We know it's a negative correlation, but now we're going to look at that line. I want you to think, How close are those dots to that line? Okay, so let's look at this. I would say it's not the line, the dots aren't touching the line, they're not all on the line, so it can't be -1. I would say it's maybe right around 0.5 or maybe even a little bit -0.6-ish. So we could say that our negative correlation here, and we're just estimating, would be like a -0.6. The dots are pretty close. They're not on the line, that's -1. Okay, and the same would be true if we had a positive correlation. If it was +1, it means all the dots are on that line. They make a linear line, okay? Again, we are estimating this. There is a way that we can use graphing calculators to figure out the exact correlation, but that is not something we're asked to do. So we're just estimating about where it would be. Remember, 0 would be it's all over the place, no correlation. So this is pretty simple. We want you to be able to graph. We want you to identify, is it positive, negative, or no correlation? And we want you to draw that trend line and then try to come up with the value. Take a guess at what the value of that correlation would be. That's it. We can describe our data as a positive correlation, meaning that as we look at these dots from left to right, they're increasing. Okay? Or we can look at this data as a negative correlation. As we look at them left to right, they are decreasing. Or we can look at the data as no correlation, meaning look at it. It's all over the place. I can't tell if they're going up or going down. So let's go back to what is a trend line? Well, a trend line here is a line. It is a linear straight line. It is not a connect the dots. So it is a straight line that's drawn near all the points and that shows a correlation. So we're going to try to draw, just kind of like I did up in example 2, where I drew those lines for the positive and negative correlation. We're just going to try to draw a straight line. It's not connect the dots. And we want our line to be close to all of our dots. So let's go back and let's look at what we call a strong negative correlation, a no correlation, and a strong positive. Okay. Well, we have a negative correlation. So our correlation value or number, I would say, is going to be negative. Now, strong means if it is a -1, it is a straight linear line. All the dots are on it. We know our dots aren't even touching it. Okay? The closer we get to 0, the further away they are from a straight line. Okay? So I would say that our trend line would be around a correlation value of probably negative like 0.5. Okay,